it's just a bad rap on me. It's something that, I'll have to accept and deal with, because that's the way it is. Don't nobody want to hear nothing about how many scholarships I give out, what I do as far as charities. Don't nobody want to hear about that. That's not news when it comes to Allen Iverson. A negative story is what people want to hear about when it comes to me.
Allen Iverson didn't just dislike players. He hated them, fully, deeply, and without apology. 6 feet tall, 165 pounds soaking wet, cornrows, tattoos, a crossover that could break ankles and egos in the same motion. The answer wasn't supposed to survive in a league built for giants. He wasn't supposed to lead the NBA in scoring. He wasn't supposed to drag a mediocre Sixers team to the finals on his back. But Allen Iverson never cared what he was supposed to do. 11-time All-Star, 2001 MVP, Rookie of the Year, 4-time scoring champion. The cultural revolution who turned hip-hop swagger into basketball currency and made the establishment uncomfortable while doing it. I didn't just play basketball. He redefined what a superstar could look like. But that defiance, that refusal to bend, it came with a price. Critics questioned his shot selection. Coaches challenged his commitment. The media turned his infamous practice rant into a punchline. We talking about practice.
Anybody tell you that I miss practice, if a coach say I miss practice and y'all hear it, then that's that. I mean, I might have missed one practice this year, but if somebody say he doesn't come to practice, it can be one practice. Out of all the practices this year, that's enough. If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. If I'm hurt, I'm hurt. I mean, simple as that. It ain't about that. I mean, it's not about that at all. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but it's easy to talk about. It's easy to sum it up when you just talk about practice. We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. Well, Coach, I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
22 times he said it, and for years, that's all people wanted to remember. Not the 40-point games, not carrying a team with no business being in the finals, just practice. First Union Center, Game 1, 2001, NBA Finals. Iverson hits a fadeaway jumper over Tyronn Lue. Lue stumbles backward, and he steps over him, not around, over. The coldest, most disrespectful move the finals had ever seen. Except, here's the twist. Iverson later admitted he didn't even like that moment. I don't like it, because I love him, he said about Lue. That's the thing about fierce on the court, loyal to the bone off it. See, Iverson grew up in Hampton, Virginia, where survival meant being tougher than your circumstances, where backing down was a luxury you couldn't afford. That mentality never left. Every challenge to his heart, his game, his manhood cut deep. Personal, permanent. Most players had rivals. Iverson collected enemies, not because he wanted to, but because he wore every emotion on his tattooed sleeves. When someone tried to embarrass him, when they mocked his size, when they acted like a little man didn't belong in a big man's league, that wasn't just competition. That was disrespect. And he never forgot disrespect. Some tried to physically intimidate him. Others questioned whether he belonged. A few crossed lines that went beyond basketball, and those who pushed too far, they didn't just get crossed over. They earned his hatred. This isn't about playoff battles or competitive intensity. This is about personal grudges, vendettas that outlasted careers and burned hotter than any championship rivalry. 6 names that still make the answer's jaw clench. Because when the toughest pound-for-pound warrior in NBA history admits he hated someone, when a 165-pound giant who carried an entire city on his back draws that line, you know they earned every ounce of it. These are the 6 players Allen Iverson hated most. But before proceeding, please take a second and subscribe. And like this video, it will be very motivation for us. There were players Allen Iverson didn't like, but Reggie Miller, he was the one Iverson hated playing against. Not because Reggie was the most athletic or the strongest, but because he played the game like it was war and he never stopped talking. Iverson came into the league in 1996. By then, Reggie Miller was already a veteran, a 6'7" shooting guard with a wiry frame, a deadly jumper, and a mouth that could cut glass. He wasn't just an opponent, he was a presence. He lived in your head. He baited you, needled you, drained a 3 in your face, and smiled as he jogged back down the floor, whispering just loud enough for you to hear. He'd talk the entire game, Iverson once said, and then drop 30 on you like it was nothing. But Miller wasn't just a talker, he was surgical. He moved without the ball, better than almost anyone in the NBA. You couldn't relax for a second. Chase him over one screen, and you'd run into another. Go under the pick, and he'd step back and bury a 3. Overplay him, and he'd back-cut you for a layup. He was like water, flowing wherever the space opened, always moving, always ready to punish you. In 2000, during Iverson's breakout MVP-level season, the Sixers matched up against the Pacers several times, and every time, Miller found a way to get under Iverson's skin. One game in particular stood out. February 6, 2000, a national TV matchup. Iverson dropped 27 points, but Miller hit the dagger late in the fourth and clapped back with a look that said, "I've done this before. You're still learning how this league works." Reggie wasn't just older. He was calculated. He played with a patience Iverson didn't understand yet. While AI played with fury and speed, Miller played the long game. He'd go quiet for 2 quarters and then erupt in the fourth. He'd draw fouls not just with contact but with craft. He'd exaggerate every bump, force the ref to blow the whistle, and then hit all 3 free throws like it was routine. They weren't rivals in the traditional sense. Iverson's speed and explosiveness were from another world compared to Reggie's slower, sniper-style game. But that difference in styles made the battles even more frustrating. Iverson would beat 3 defenders, twist midair, and miss a contested layup. Reggie would run off 2 screens and calmly bury a corner 3. You're chasing this dude all over the court. You finally catch up to him, and he just smiles and hits the shot anyway. That smile was what really bothered AI. Reggie never showed fear, not even when the game got physical. He was part of that Indiana squad known for their toughness. Dale Davis, the Davis brothers, Ron Artest later on, but it was Miller who set the tone. He wasn't built like a bruiser, but his confidence made him bulletproof. In total, Miller and Iverson faced off 20 times in the regular season. Miller's Pacers won 12 of those matchups. While Iverson usually had the higher scoring numbers, Miller's efficiency and late-game execution made the difference. In playoff meetings, they collided in the 2000 Eastern semifinals, a hard-fought 6-game series. Miller averaged over 20 points, hitting key shots down the stretch. Indiana advanced. Iverson went home. What made it worse was that Miller didn't even seem fazed. While AI seethed with intensity, Reggie was calm, ice cold. He'd walk past you after a foul and whisper something that'd stick with you all quarter. He didn't need to scream. His presence was the noise. And then there was the flop. Iverson hated the flopping. Reggie was a master of exaggerating contact, throwing his arms, arching his back, selling it perfectly. He turned the court into a stage, and the refs often bought a front-row seat. It wasn't just annoying, it changed momentum. And when you're a rhythm player like Iverson, a broken flow is more than frustrating. It's strategic sabotage. Over time, Iverson learned how to carry himself like a veteran. But in those early years, Reggie Miller was a reminder that experience could beat talent if talent wasn't locked in. And for all of AI's pride and defiance, he knew, deep down, he couldn't rattle Reggie. That's what made him so hateable. He wouldn't give you the satisfaction of emotion. He'd just beat you. Later in his career, Iverson spoke more respectfully about the players who gave him trouble. But Miller? That respect always came with a slight edge. Reggie talked so much trash, and the worst part? He backed it up. There are players you forget once they're gone. Reggie Miller wasn't one of them. For Iverson, he was a constant test, a mirror showing him what control, confidence, and pure psychological warfare looked like. And that's why he hated him. Allen Iverson didn't hate Kobe Bryant because of trash talk, elbows, or history. He hated him because Kobe never flinched, not when Iverson crossed him, not when he cooked the Lakers for 48 points in Game 1 of the 2001 Finals, not even when the world crowned AI as the people's champ. Kobe just stared back, unmoved, unbothered, and obsessed with beating him. This wasn't a hate rooted in drama. It was rooted in reflection. Because when Iverson looked at Kobe, he saw something terrifyingly familiar. A man who loved the grind just as much, maybe more. A competitor who'd outstudy you, outwork you, outlast you, and do it all without asking for applause. Kobe? Man, he was a killer, Iverson once said. I respected him too much. But yeah, I hated going up against him. They both entered the league in 1996, both guards, both undersized for the roles they played, both labeled too much by critics, too confident, too flashy, too difficult to coach. And yet, from day one, they were polar opposites in how they approached the game. Iverson played like the world was ending. Chaos, speed, improvisation. He was all heart and pain and motion. Kobe was calculation, cold reads, footwork and angles, and punishing precision. AI played in sneakers that looked worn out by halftime. Kobe's game looked tailored, sharp, technical, airtight. What fueled the fire between them was the fact that neither was willing to blink first. In the 2001 NBA Finals, their collision reached a boiling point. Iverson was on a tear. He just dropped 52 on Toronto, followed by 46 in Game 7. He was the MVP, the underdog, the engine of a team with no second star. Kobe, he was coming off back-to-back series where he dismantled Sacramento and San Antonio, averaging over 30 points per game while defending the opposing team's best player. In Game 1 of the finals, Iverson detonated, 48 points, 6 assists, 5 steals. The Sixers stole the game in overtime, and in the moment that defined it all, AI crossed over Tyronn Lue, drained the jumper, and stepped over him like he was claiming territory. What's often forgotten is how Kobe responded, not with a viral highlight, but with quiet destruction. In the next 4 games, Kobe averaged 27 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists. He took the assignment of defending Iverson. He didn't stop him, no one really could, but he wore him down. By Game 5, Iverson was exhausted, and when the Lakers closed the series, Kobe didn't talk, didn't gesture, didn't gloat. He just walked off a champion. That silence, that refusal to entertain narrative, was what Iverson hated most. He didn't care if you cooked him one night. He was playing the long game, always. In their head-to-head matchups, Iverson averaged 27.1 points. Kobe averaged 24.4. But the numbers don't capture the tension, because every game between them was a statement, not just about who scored more, but about whose way was right. Iverson represented freedom and emotion. Kobe represented discipline and willpower. Off the court, they rarely clashed. In fact, later in life, Iverson would speak glowingly of Kobe. He told the story of how Kobe once invited him to dinner, and Iverson, true to form, declined to train and went to a club instead. Years later, he admitted he should have gone with Kobe. I was going to the club. He was going to the gym. That's the difference. That difference gnawed at Iverson because as time passed and careers were judged not just by highlights but by rings, longevity, legacy, Kobe's discipline shone brighter. He played 20 seasons, won 5 titles, scored 81 in a game, and walked away with every scar, emotional and physical, earned. Iverson, meanwhile, had a shorter prime. His body broke down earlier. His career ended without the same closure. And watching Kobe succeed, not because of politics or market, but because of sheer obsession, made it harder to stomach. But hate, in Iverson's world, never meant disrespect. It meant the opponent lived in your mind, forced you to level up, made you feel something raw. Kobe did all of that, even when he was locked in a feud with Shaq, even when he was shooting 8 for 27, even when his team was down double digits, Kobe believed. And that belief made you doubt yourself. Iverson hated that because he prided himself on being fearless. But Kobe didn't just play without fear. He played like he didn't acknowledge its existence. Their final meeting came in 2010. AI was a shell of himself. Kobe was still elite. After the game, Kobe hugged him and told him what most fans never heard. You were the toughest I ever had to guard. Iverson never forgot that. It didn't erase the rivalry, but it added something deeper, validation. Hate fades, respect lasts. And if Allen Iverson named Kobe Bryant among the players he hated, it's only because he couldn't ignore him. If Reggie Miller lived in Iverson's head rent-free, Stephon Marbury was already there, throwing parties, breaking windows, and leaving the place a mess. This wasn't a rivalry formed in the NBA. It was born on the blacktop, in the imagination of every East Coast kid who believed New York versus Philly was a war of identity. Both Iverson and Marbury came into the league in 1996. Same draft class, same position, same chip on their shoulders. But that's where the symmetry ended. Marbury was Brooklyn Polish with Coney Island swagger. Iverson was Newport News grit with Philly fire. One saw the court like a chessboard, the other like a boxing ring. And when they played, it wasn't just a basketball game, it was an argument. Me and Stephon, we was always compared, Iverson once said. And I didn't like that, because we ain't the same. We never played the same. We never carried ourselves the same. But that was precisely why Marbury got under Iverson's skin. He was close enough in skill to be in the conversation, but different enough to never be confused with him. And if there was one thing Iverson hated, it was being lumped in. Their rookie years told very different stories. Iverson came in firing. He dropped 40 points 5 times in his first season and crossed up Michael Jordan on national TV. Marbury, meanwhile, was more methodical in Minnesota, averaging 15 points and 7 assists, while feeding Kevin Garnett and running the offense. The media played up their contrasts. AI was chaos and flash. Marbury was control and calculation. But by the late 1990s, when Marbury forced his way out of Minnesota and landed in New Jersey, things changed. He was now the guy, and that's when the friction with Iverson began to heat up. Their matchups were intense, not always efficient, but emotionally charged. Iverson would go full tilt, pushing the pace, absorbing contact, hitting floaters off one foot. Marbury would respond with hesitation pull-ups, behind-the-back dribbles into step-backs, and crisp dimes that made you appreciate how tightly he controlled the tempo. In March 2001, one of their most memorable duels, happened in a nationally televised showdown. Iverson dropped 33 points. Marbury answered with 38 and 10 assists. The Nets won in overtime. That stung Iverson, especially as it came in a season where he was gunning for MVP. But what hurt more wasn't the stat line, it was the swagger. Marbury had no fear of Iverson. He didn't look up to him, didn't defer, didn't care that AI was the league's scoring leader. He acted like he was the better guard. And on some nights, he was. That disrespect, real or perceived, was gasoline on Iverson's fire. Steph would try to cook you, then let you know about it. And he wasn't fake with it, he meant it. Their games reflected that tension. Both guards would take turns going ISO, breaking down defenses, trading floaters for step-backs, steals for crossovers. There was very little facilitating. These were duels, not games, and that's what made it personal. But Iverson's dislike of Marbury wasn't just about style, it was about leadership. AI, for all his flaws, was beloved by teammates. He'd put his body on the line every night. He played hurt, led by example, and never asked out of a fight. Marbury, meanwhile, developed a reputation, fair or not, as someone who didn't elevate the team around him. His stops in New Jersey, Phoenix, and later New York were marked by flashes of brilliance and tension in the locker room. Coaches clashed with him. Teammates grew frustrated. Media narratives followed him everywhere. Iverson saw that, and he hated it, because to him, being a point guard was a responsibility, not a platform. You didn't just score. You led. You endured. You kept your crew intact, even when the ship was sinking. He didn't see that same fight in Steph. Ironically, both men were misunderstood by the league. Both were ball-dominant, tough, emotionally raw, and too honest for the NBA's polished media game. But Iverson's story was packaged as tragic hero, while Marbury's was often seen as wasted talent. That difference in framing bothered AI. He felt like he earned his bruises. He felt Marbury tried to control the narrative without earning the scars. And that, more than any single game or quote, was the root of the hate. Later in their careers, both would take different paths. Iverson faded from the league after brief stints in Detroit and Memphis. Marbury found redemption in China, becoming a national icon and winning championships in the CBA. In an odd twist of fate, Marbury rebuilt his image overseas, while Iverson's own story remained complicated in America. But when asked about players he hated, not off the court, but in the heat of competition, Iverson always came back to Stephon Marbury because he made it personal. He mirrored AI in just enough ways to feel like a rival, but never in the ways that mattered most to Iverson. Allen Iverson never needed a reason to go at someone, but with Paul Pierce, he had one. They weren't just two competitors in the same conference. They were two stars built from completely different cloth, and Iverson hated everything Pierce represented on the court. Smug confidence, deliberate pacing, and that Boston arrogance that made every game feel like a war of pride. In Pierce, he didn't just return the energy, he amplified it. The grudge between Iverson and Pierce wasn't a single incident. It was a collection of moments, small gestures, words muttered at the free throw line, smirks after tough buckets. Nothing that would make headlines, but everything that made Iverson want to torch Boston every time he stepped in the Garden. Their battles began in the early 2000s when both were leading teams that were desperately trying to claw their way into contention. Iverson had just come off an MVP season. Pierce was emerging as a star for the Celtics. But while AI played with chaos and fury, Pierce played with method and calculation. He moved slower, but always to the right spot. He didn't need to jump over you. He just needed a sliver of space to launch that high-release jumper. Iverson couldn't stand it. He'd hit a shot, talk to the bench, and act like he already knew it was going in, Iverson said years later. That used to light me up. What separated this rivalry from others was the subtle disrespect. Not outright trash talk, though there was plenty of that, but something deeper. Pierce played with an air of superiority, like he'd already written the ending before the game started. Iverson thrived off underdog energy. He was never supposed to make it. Too small, too reckless, too raw. He carried Philadelphia like a burden, dragging the Sixers through the East with nothing but sheer defiance. Pierce, on the other hand, was hailed as the Truth, a nickname Shaq gave him after a game in 2001, and carried himself like a king, without needing a crown. That kind of confidence got under Iverson's skin. In their head-to-head matchups, Iverson averaged 30.4 points, 7.3 assists, and 4.1 rebounds. Pierce, 23.9 points, 6.8 rebounds, 3.7 assists. Statistically, AI often outshined him, but the games were rarely blowouts. Pierce had help, Antoine Walker for a time, then eventually Garnett, Allen, and Rondo. Iverson, he had to create something out of nothing every single night. One of the most intense moments between them came during a 2002 game in Boston, when the Celtics mounted a furious comeback. Pierce was electric, hitting tough shots and jawing at Iverson the whole way. After one dagger three, he turned and gave AI a stare that wasn't just confident, it was condescending. That kind of moment, for a player like Iverson, lived in memory forever. Pierce had his own issues with AI too. He hated how Iverson got away with so much contact, the crossovers that flirted with carrying, the foul calls he drew with flailing limbs, and most of all, the way AI could control the entire emotional tone of a game, even when he wasn't playing well. He could miss 10 shots in a row and still think the next one was going in. That's dangerous, Pierce once admitted. But beneath the tension, there was another truth. They needed each other. Iverson needed players who pushed him to that next gear, players he could lock in on, obsess over, and use as fuel. Pierce provided that. He was durable, consistent, and had that edge that never softened. Even during the 2008 finals run, when Iverson was no longer the AI of old, and Pierce had reinvented himself as the veteran leader of Boston's new Big Three, there was still tension. Iverson watched from afar as Pierce celebrated a ring, something that had eluded him. And in interviews that followed, Iverson never quite gave Pierce the credit he gave others. Not like Kobe, not like Vince. With Pierce, it was always clipped, measured. He did what he was supposed to, Iverson said about the 2008 title. He had help. He made shots. That's the game. That wasn't shade. That was Iverson's code. He knew how hard it was to get there. But with Pierce, he never forgot the battles that didn't go on the highlight reels. The ones in December, the ones that ended with bruises and bitterness. Even after retirement, when Pierce was climbing the ESPN ladder and AI was entering the Hall of Fame, they kept their distance. There was no reunion moment, no viral hug, no sit-down podcast to rehash the wars, because not every rivalry ends with forgiveness. Some just stay hot, even after the game is over. Iverson hated Paul Pierce, not for who he was as a man, but for what he symbolized as a player. A wall he could never quite knock down, a name he could never completely erase, a mirror that reflected a different version of greatness. And for Allen Iverson, that was enough to never let go. When Allen Iverson laced up against Ray Allen, there was no trash talk, no shouting, no hard elbows exchanged under the rim, and somehow, that made it worse. To Iverson, Ray Allen represented everything he wasn't: polished, quiet, corporate, clean-cut. They didn't chase chaos, he avoided it. He moved through games like he was gliding on water, pristine jumper, smooth footwork, and barely a trace of emotion. For Allen Iverson, who played every possession like a fight for survival, that lack of edge wasn't admirable. It was irritating. Ray Allen didn't bark after big shots. He didn't jaw at the crowd. He didn't dance on the logo or throw his arms in the air. He just buried threes with surgical precision and jogged back down the court like it was just another rep in an empty gym. To Iverson, that wasn't confidence. That was arrogance, disguised as calm. Their beef wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It was silent, simmering, and layered in resentment that started long before they ever faced off in the NBA. Back in college, Iverson was the fiery star at Georgetown. Allen was the soft-spoken sharpshooter at UCNN. They were both lottery picks in 1996, but only one carried the scars of a rough upbringing, legal drama, and media skepticism. Allen was the media's favorite. Polished interviews, perfect image, and when he got drafted by Minnesota and traded to Milwaukee, the spotlight followed him, but the scrutiny didn't. Iverson noticed that. He always did. When they met in the NBA, their games couldn't have been more different. Iverson slashed, twisted, collapsed defenses, and lived on the floor. Allen floated, waited, and killed you from distance. But it wasn't just their styles that clashed. It was their energy. Iverson thrived in noise. Allen thrived in silence, and that silence felt like a snub. In the early 2000s, the Bucks were rising with Ray Allen as their calm leader. The Sixers, meanwhile, were built entirely around Iverson's volatility, his usage, his personality, his stubborn will. In 2001, the two collided in the Eastern Conference Finals. Philly versus Milwaukee wasn't just a war between teams, it was a battle of identities, and the contrast between Iverson and Allen was the headline, even if neither one ever said much publicly. Game after game, Allen lit up the Sixers from deep, step-back threes, quick trigger catch and shoots, dagger after dagger, and every time he nailed one, he turned and jogged away. No celebration, no emotion. That, more than anything, got under Iverson's skin. Because I wanted it to mean something. He wanted Allen to feel the pressure, to show the heat of the moment. But Ray never gave him that satisfaction. The series went 7. Iverson dropped 46 in Game 6 to avoid elimination, then 44 in Game 7 to send Milwaukee home. And while most remember that as Iverson's statement series, the one that propelled him to the finals, he remembered it as something else, a necessary erasure of a player he didn't respect. Not because Allen wasn't great, but because Iverson never saw him fight. In Iverson's world, every star had to suffer, had to bleed, had to struggle. That's what earned respect. But Ray Allen seemed untouched. His game was built in quiet gyms, not street corners. His confidence came from repetition, not resilience. And to Iverson, that made him feel less real. The irony? Allen respected Iverson. He once said, "You never want to get into a scoring battle with Iverson. He turns games into his own movie." But Iverson never returned that compliment. In fact, over the years, he often left Allen out when naming the best shooters, the toughest matchups, the guys who gave him fits. Ray was rarely mentioned, not because he wasn't good, but because in Iverson's mind, he wasn't built for it. Years later, when Ray won a title in Boston and hit one of the most iconic shots in NBA history with Miami, Iverson didn't hate the success, but he never embraced the man behind it, because in his eyes, Ray still hadn't earned that nod, hadn't scraped the floor enough. The contrast between them never faded. Even in retirement, Iverson still gets animated talking about Kobe, about T-Mac, about guys who challenged him emotionally. But when Ray Allen comes up, silence, no stories, no moments, just a name in passing. And maybe that's the point. Iverson didn't hate Ray because of one moment. He hated him because there were no moments, no tension, no boiling point, just 7 games in 2001 and the memory of a guy who kept firing, kept running, and never once broke character. Ray Allen never gave Iverson what he craved, a war. And to Allen Iverson, that made him forgettable, which, in his world, was the worst kind of hate. Allen Iverson didn't hate Steve Francis because of some brutal playoff war or some headline-making scuffle. He hated him because Francis reminded him too much of himself, but in ways that felt unearned. Steve Francis came into the league in 1999. He arrived with swagger, crossovers, power dunks, no fear. The league branded him the franchise before he'd even earned the nickname, and that rubbed Iverson the wrong way. Not because Francis wasn't talented. He clearly was, but because he hadn't gone through the fire yet. No scars, no stripes, no battles, just hype. Iverson had clawed his way through relentless criticism, courtroom trials, and cultural battles just to be allowed in the NBA. Francis showed up smiling, high-fiving, and dunking on centers with flair, like it was supposed to be easy. To Iverson, that wasn't charisma. That was skipping steps. The first time they matched up, you could feel the tension. Iverson didn't greet him, didn't dap him up, didn't even acknowledge the franchise label. He just locked in. Because to him, Francis wasn't a peer yet. He was a test, a challenge to the order Iverson had helped build. And to be fair, Francis was a problem. He had insane vertical lift, could blow by defenders with a powerful first step, and had enough flair to drop jaws on any given night. But Iverson didn't care about highlights. He cared about legacy. And in his mind, Steve Francis was more flash than fight. Their games were eerily similar in some ways. Explosive, improvisational, impossible to coach, but their paths completely different. Iverson had survived John Thompson's system at Georgetown, taken all the heat as a #1 pick, with tattoos and braids in a league that wasn't ready, bled in playoff wars against the Raptors, Bucks, and Lakers. Francis, meanwhile, had turned down Vancouver, got traded to Houston, and made 3 all-star teams without a single postseason moment of consequence. So when they met, Iverson played angry. He pressed up. He swiped. He attacked the rim like it owed him something. In a 2002 game, he dropped 58 points on the Rockets, the second highest scoring game of his career. He didn't say Francis's name once, but you could feel it. Every drive, every crossover, every pull-up. It felt personal. It wasn't that Francis disrespected him. It's that Francis represented a generation that didn't understand the weight of what Iverson had carried. They mimicked the style, the headbands, the tattoos, the attitude, but not the substance, not the bruises. And that made it hard for Iverson to respect him. Not because he lacked talent, but because he hadn't yet earned the right to walk the same path. The NBA had opened the door because of Iverson, and now others were sprinting through it like the battle was over. But to AI, it never was. He was still fighting every night to prove he belonged, still viewed with skepticism, still labeled as trouble. Meanwhile, Francis was on magazine covers smiling, dunking, and selling sneakers. There's a reason Iverson never mentions Francis in the same breath as the guards he respected, Kobe, Kidd, Stephon, Barron, because with them, the respect came through combat, through playoff pain and late-night gym sessions. With Francis, it felt packaged. Years later, Iverson softened a bit. In interviews, he admitted Francis was tough to guard and crazy athletic. But even in those rare moments of praise, there was distance. He never called him one of the greats, never gave him the embrace he gave to peers who'd been through the grind. Because to Iverson, Steve Francis was never the enemy. He was the ghost of what the league wanted instead of what it needed. He was a mirror, one that didn't show scars. And sometimes that's the hardest kind of hate to let go. And maybe that's why Iverson never truly let that grudge go. because Francis wasn't just another flashy guard. He was a reminder that the game was changing, that the league Iverson bled for was being rebranded without the bruises. For someone who wore his pain like a badge, that kind of shift was hard to forgive. But if Iverson saw the next generation as imitators, Larry Bird saw them as challengers, and a few as worthy heirs. So if you want to hear about the players Larry Legend truly respected, the ones who earned his admiration through grit, skill, and heart, check out our next video. Larry Bird names his 6 favorite basketball players. Please also do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video and share your thoughts in the comments section.